one thing that I really want to highlight is helping women understand that we can take up space. That's because if we don't respect half the population, how are we supposed to have respect for everyone else? Which we should, because we're all people.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
We are live from the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios today in Laguna Beach, California. And we keep rolling out incredibly talented women on the show. And Kana LiVolsi, thank you so much for joining us. What a pleasure to have you in studio today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Ben.
So let's kick things off. I was hoping you can explain where your agency, Dos Mundos, fits into the market ecosystem and your professional background.
Sure. So Dos Mundos is what we like to call brand CX focused. So we really look at where your relationship is with your consumers. So today brands have so many choices. Our consumers have so many choices with each brand. Like if you see a vegan ice cream, there's about 20 other ones on the shelf and others vying for that space. The reason that people buy your ice cream is one, because they like it, but two, because they trust and feel like it's a good brand to buy from. When you break that trust, consumers via cancel culture or anything else, they go away and you lose profit. It's also better for the world to have a better relationship with your consumers. But we look at it from end to end, making sure that there's no gaps.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. So what is it about your digital marketing that you love? And do you believe it's more learned skills versus natural talent?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think that there's a pretty strong combination of learned skills versus natural talent. I think that in marketing in particular, it's all about testing. Like we think ourselves as scientific creatives. So we will experiment based on educated guesses, and we will continue to tweak and to continue to learn and to mold, just like a scientist would in a lab. So there's a certain amount of instinct that you build over time, but there's a certain amount that you're born with. And when things go wrong, you learn more. When you try things that are a little bit more bold, you learn more. So I think it's a heavy combination. So,
Kana, your website emphasizes the need for custom work as opposed to true formulas, mm-hmm. right? Elaborate on why that is. I want to understand that.
Okay. So it comes down to authenticity, which is a very big buzzword right now, mm-hmm. Because people got very tired of the Pinterest aesthetic, the Instagram aesthetic, where everything is homogenized. And so in branding today, you'll still see a lot of the brands that are not performing well have stopped at the baseline of, okay, everything is cohesive. It's about building in that extra layer of personality, understanding your niche audiences, and tapping into that. So the reason that TikTok is so successful isn't because people just want to watch short form video. It's because there are communities on TikTok for every weird part of your personality. And that's where it really thrives. And the companies that tap into that are the ones that are doing well. So if you don't have personalization where your brand and your team is authentically presenting what you're interested in and what matters to you and leaning into that, it's hard to make your business decisions. But it's also very hard for consumers because they can feel when a company is being fake.
And the reason why I brought it up is because we've had other guests on the show with books called things like The YouTube Formula, mm-hmm. and obviously Brendan Kane of How I Built 1 Million Followers in 30 Days. Mm-hmm. That's what spurred the interest, mm-hmm. and why I feel that sometimes it needs to be discussed of like, what is the best formula to get engagement?
Well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
There is a level where you want to make sure that you have base foundations and structures, mm-hmm. but that gets you at the baseline. If you want to be a disruptor and an innovator in the industry, you have to have personalized strategies. And so that's kind of the difference. Like, yes, you can scale to a certain number, but most people need a personalized strategy. Most companies need a personalized strategy in order to grow and really take hold in the space and have kind of a future-proof brand.
Okay. So just for fun, I'm interested, how do you approach advising marketing for your personal brand? I saw your personal brand. I know there's a lot you don't know about me, but I was thinking of talking you through your approach with a live example.
Okay.
Would be interesting and fun for listeners.
Sure. So what do you want me to do? You want me to talk through?
Yeah, I want you, like, talk to me about an approach with a live example would be interesting and fun for listeners if you took, say, a guy like me on social media.
All right. So a guy like you on social media. Well, in your particular sector of real estate and business development and relationships, what would be really interesting would be to look at where there's overlap and where people aren't doing things. So I was meeting with a company yesterday that is doing a lot in the virtual metaverse building space. And obviously that's a much more long-term play. But looking at building out venues on there where you can actually get a team of creatives doing a certain amount of sustainable products that give you a passive income that are all about the Ben Reinberg brand. So you could create interesting venues that are around your brand in that space where you could be hosting your podcast, for example, for some of your guests in the future. The other thing that I think would be interesting with your brand is the idea of third spaces, which is something we play in a lot, because it allows for more brand partnerships and for more exposure. Because with someone like you, you're very well established. You are, and you're very niche. So opening you up with more partnerships through third spaces is kind of where we would start to be building towards. We would also look at what your goals are. So what are your goals? Like, where do you want to be as a personal brand? Can you give me like an example of something that you feel like would be awesome for you in the future?
Well, I think what we're looking at doing is with our future guests on the podcast is shooting it on location, more on location,
I love that.
more in relevant spaces like commercial real estate properties that we own around the country, and bringing that guest into our sphere, so to speak. I love that. That would be something we would look at doing as an example.
Yes. I love that. Well, with something like that, you could lean into your personal brand. So let's look at your brand pillars. What are the pillars of your company? Like, what is your North Star when you're talking about who you are as a brand?
Well, as our brand, we have core values: transparency, integrity, consistency, and expertise in what we do. And we're, say, the leading experts in office industrial retail with a focus on medical office. So we are experts in medical office ownership and investing. Perfect.
So with that, do you do a lot of conversation, just out of curiosity, with medical spaces, or like with people in the medical field outside of the commercial?
Sometimes. Could we do more? Absolutely. Which would be a good idea.
Right. So what I like to do when we're working with a new brand is just kind of get to know both you as a person, the leadership team, the founder, the face of the brand, and then your team. And we'll do kickoff exercises to get to know, kind of like what you were talking about, y'all were doing earlier.
Right.
To get to know what really matters to you at the core, and then figure out how that aligns with your products and your partnerships in place, and kind of building an ecosystem around that. So we talk about, we build worlds around your brand. That's a big part of it. We look at what your touch points are, if there are any places where people could understand you better, and you could be getting more revenue from that area. We want to be tapping into that.
Okay.
And also building out at the same time your long-term plays for brands. So looking at that long-term vision.
So you've been recognized for a lot of awards, being a top CMO, besides doing great work for your clients. What's been your approach to your personal brand to get so many recognitions to date?
It sounds silly, but being a nice person, generally.
Okay. Well, that's good.
I feel like I am always open to giving advice to people. I'm not a person who gatekeeps. Obviously, I don't share things that are within NDAs around client projects, but in terms of knowledge in the industry and where somebody could go, I'm always very open. And I like socializing with other people and talking to them about what their problems are and how we can work together, or how they might be able to solve it. Like with different awards, I feel like that comes through people just finding us on the internet, seeing that what we're doing is very authentic to who we are, and not trying to be something we're not. Okay. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, your company materials talk a lot about outside the box ideas, right? And so I'm curious, how do you approach fostering your personal creativity? And are there certain places or times a day where you're the most creative? We just went through this exercise the other day. How do you mentally manage between the stresses of management and execution versus creating the right mental space? Because, during the day, you want to be able to unleash your creativity.
Right. So it's interesting that you bring up outside the box thinking, because what actually helps me be more creative is to build a box first, is to figure out what our guidelines are of this is us, this isn't us, what we're trying to do, what we're not trying to do, and get an idea of the scope that we need to be creative in. It's kind of like, this is a very silly example, but let's think like, for me, like 20 years ago, almost back in college, when you'd have a party and somebody says, think of come as something that starts with the letter P. You can be infinitely creative because you have guidelines, versus Halloween, where you would never know what to wear because there's too many options.
That's right.
So it's about kind of narrowing your options into what feels like it's in your world and in your realm, and then building in that ecosystem.
So what's your favorite client to work with? Like, what type of client do you enjoy working with, and what are some great stories you could share?
My favorite type of client to work with are companies that have spent so much time focusing on their product and making something really good that they wanted themselves, that they are in a really strong position, but they might not know how to best position it. And I know that's very vague, but it's oftentimes the people that are focused more on doing something to help others are not focused on the ego of building a business, which you see a lot today. Where sometimes people say they want to be a business owner, but it's because they want to feel valued and feel like they have an autonomy and an ownership over their life, when in reality, when you own a business, as you know, you are beholden to everybody.
That's right.
You're much more of a servant than you are a boss.
That's right. Absolutely.
And so it is, and sorry, I went too far. What?
No, it's explain to me, like, just tell me about how you feel about fostering your personal creativity. There's a certain time of days that you're focusing on where you're in your genius and saying, here are the times that I shine during the day. So
every day I will take as many walks as I can in between meetings, because I think better when I'm moving. I like to take my dog, and we have a beautiful little nature preserve near our house. And I'll go outside and I'll take my phone, and I won't trip because there's a trail. I won't walk into traffic because there's a trail. But I will start reading the articles from the day and the newsletters I subscribe to, just to start getting my brain working so that it starts making connections.
Got it.
The other challenge is I typically think really creatively in the evening and after everyone's gone to bed. So that's when I work on projects where we're really coming up with a new campaign idea and we're stuck, is at night.
Okay.
Just because there's no interruptions and the world is asleep, so you feel like you have the space to just sit down and relax.
So I thought it was interesting that one of your top clients was an e-commerce book retailer.
Oh, that was my old job.
Oh, okay. Well, here we go.
A long time ago. Yeah, I was in
this is
film
gonna
and
get
publishing.
interesting. And I'm sure as a marketer, you notice how people's attraction span seems to have gotten shorter with the age of smartphones. I think we all can agree with that. Obviously, people still read books, but less than they're used to, right? So I was wondering when I was researching, like, if shorter attention spans were the key consideration when you developed their marketing strategy. How did that work for you when you brought them on as a client?
So I was in film, and then I was in digital publishing before starting the agency. And so with this e-commerce brand, I helped grow to be the number one independent ebook company in the world, and the third largest behind Amazon and Barnes & Noble, which at the time were huge still. It was all about finding the niche audiences, which is actually what we're seeing today. And this was probably, 10 years ago at this point. And where attention spans were waning, but we were some of the first, I think we did and created the first online book signing. So it's very simple, just had set up a time with all these authors that people had a loyalty to, and had points where they could be where their audiences knew that they could be coming and interacting just in Facebook in comments, which is very rudimentary, but it was the technology at the time. And it got people engaged. It's not about necessarily having a short attention span. It's about saying things that are interesting to other people. Because, I mean, we still watch movies like, look at the Super Mario brother who's blowing things out of the water still. And people are going to the theme park. I mean, my husband and I went to the theme park last week.
Right.
We have attention spans. Look at the gaming community. Look at how much we will spiral and obsess about different things. It's just that we've stopped talking in a way that other people are interested in.
Right. So it's about adding value.
It's about adding value.
How did you come up with the name of your company, Dos Mundos? You know, you've been running it for 8 years now. And so how'd you come up with the name, and like, what are the goals for Dos Mundos over the next approximately, say, 5 years?
Okay. Those are all, first of all, our goals are lofty. But the name actually came from my former business partner and good friend, Margaret. So originally we started Dos Mundos, and I would have never started a company. That's just never was something that was interesting to me, because it seemed like a lot of work, and it seemed like a lot of responsibility.
It is a lot of work.
But I kind of fell into it because my friend Margaret and I were randomly enough in a Zumba class, and I hadn't seen her in 9 years, and she was the other person in the room that had no rhythm. And I said, hey, I know that person. So we started chatting, and she had just come back from Argentina, where she had been producing for Discovery Channel and a bunch of the Latin American versions of different studios. And we realized that we had very complementary skills, and we said, hey, let's just try this. Let's just see how this goes, to create an environment where people feel welcome and safe, and you're creating a good product. One of the things that matters really deeply to me with Dos Mundos is making sure that we're fostering creativity, and people feel very respected in the environment, because that's where you get the good ideas. And so that was something that was interesting to me with starting an agency, is that we could actually create our own culture. And the name Dos Mundos means two worlds in Spanish. It was originally analog and digital was how we thought of it, because we also did murals, we do installations in restaurants, sign building, all of the things that go with it, and the activations, as well as the digital. But it has evolved into being more around the strategy and creative coming together, because at the end of the day, it's all like the overall digital experience, which is a fun, silly word that's now being used a lot. But it's really that we build worlds around people's brands, like I said, so that we're creating that ecosystem, we're creating that box where they can thrive and aren't, what's the term, cutting off your nose to spite your own face?
Yeah. Don't cut your nose to spite off your own face. That's correct.
People do a lot of very short-term actions and try things that are that actually cause big losses for the company, because they haven't built an ecosystem that really helps. And so we like to make sure that we're doing that by building these worlds. And Dos Mundos has oddly evolved into what we needed it to be. So that's how the name came about. And I feel bad just monologuing here, but there's 3 questions I'm trying to get.
Well, what's the plans for the next 5 years? Like, you said you had lofty goals. What are the goals?
Well, so we talk about the end of our capabilities deck basically says that we build worlds around your brand in hopes of making the universe a little better place. So with everybody that we work with, there's a certain level of social consciousness, whether it's just that you care about how your team operates, that you are looking at sustainability, inclusion, whatever, just something that makes it feel like we're not just taking, we're giving something back, we're adding value. Like we talked about with attention spans, right?
That's right.
Our goal is that with every product we do, we're adding value rather than taking away from the community. And so we have this ecosystem of trademark lawyers, financial strategists, developers, AR, VR, kind of across, actually like in Brazil, Sweden, like across the planet, to make sure that once we're done with the project, we can be offering you people within our realm that we trust, that we've worked with, that can also help keep it moving. Because a lot of times the problem is that with agencies, they hand something off and they leave.
That's right.
And somebody doesn't know what to do with it. And so we want to make sure that we're giving you the help that you need. So our goal is to continue to build out that ecosystem and create ideally almost an incubator for companies where you have the leadership development training, you have the legal training, you have the social media teams, you have the PR, you have everybody you need in an ecosystem that can just help you continue to grow, that's invested in your brand, that's not just treating you like you're a number.
So in your profile, you mentioned being an advocate for empowerment of muted voices.
Yeah.
Are there any particular causes or organizations you'd like to highlight to my audience about this?
There are. So this one is a very interesting topic because I have a very personal tie to some of these. So something that matters a lot to me is reproductive rights. Because it'll be 2 years ago next Friday, I was 9 months pregnant.
Okay.
With our first child, and had gotten my second COVID shot because it was deemed not safe before then.
Right.
And I got really sick, and my doctor kept telling me it was just a side effect. But then 2 days later, I had a 93-degree temperature, and my lips were blue. I couldn't move without being in complete agony. I was this big and couldn't shift on the couch without feeling like something was ripping.
Right.
And finally my husband said, we're calling an ambulance. You're not being silly. You need to be, you need to feel okay taking up space. And so he called the ambulance. And if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be here today. Because as soon as the ambulance got there, within minutes, I was dead on the couch. My uterus burst. And the next thing that happened is I woke up 3 days later after being in a coma and hearing people talk about how they should unplug me, that I would be a vegetable.
Right.
And to find that my uterus was gone and so was our son.
Okay.
And so there's a problem, particularly with women, where we feel comfortable taking up a certain amount of space, but it's usually for other people only. And we don't feel comfortable taking up space ourselves. And so one thing that I really want to highlight is helping women understand that we can take up space. That's because if we don't respect half the population, how are we supposed to have respect for everyone else? Which we should, because we're all people.
Right.
You know, at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
That's all that matters, is we just need to be there for each other. And if we mute some voices, some of the best ideas would come out of those conversations if we just would open up the floor. So I started this group with several other women and business leaders called End the Wow, End the War on Women. We're coming up with a new title because we've shifted. That's basically focusing on how reproductive rights actually impact the bottom line of businesses. And it's in the interest of the economy to be investing in reproductive rights. If you look at the global shoe economy, for example, it's slated to grow to be 521 billion, I believe, by 2030. And do you know what the number one thing is that attributes to the growth they've had over the last several decades? And that is women having better jobs and more disposable income.
Oh, interesting.
So what would
That
take
makes
away,
sense.
right? So what's the thing that would take away a huge portion of the population's disposable income unexpectedly? Having a kid when you're not ready.
Exactly.
Or dying because our medical care is really bad.
Right.
So there is the more women that are forced to have children when they're not ready, or when something is bad, or when they could die, the less money that they have to go shopping for shoes. And it's a significant portion of the percentage of that growth would be
Yes.
impacted by these women no longer having that disposable income.
Fascinating.
And it's applicable across industries if you look at it. And if you look at our global economy, we're already incorporating AI into the junior level positions. And I mean, so much of it is that busy work, right?
Right.
So we don't need more people on the planet to be filling up space and taking those jobs. We need to be taking better care of the people that are here.
So I hear, and I believe you're gluten-free, which I am as well.
Oh,
All right.
cheers.
So yes. So what do you cook and what do you eat? And give me the protocol. Like, what do you do when you're eating out? Obviously now it's a lot easier than it was 5-10 years ago.
Sure.
I just had a plate of gluten-free pasta. It was delicious. What do you do?
Ooh, so many things. That's another place where I have to take up space in a restaurant, as I'm sure you do as well.
Sure.
But so if I'm going out to eat, I typically will research ahead of time if it has gluten-free options. But you get kind of a second nature sense on if somewhere cares, right? After a time.
Yeah.
So if somewhere is, like if at Asian food restaurants, if they don't mention specific gluten-free items on the menu, I typically don't go because so much soy sauce is mixed in.
That's right.
And there's sometimes fillers on the meats. So
Yep.
it's just, you want to make sure that you're going to a kitchen that's conscious of that allergy, because if you don't know, you don't know. You don't have to. But then also, I always ask when I first get to a restaurant if they have a gluten-free menu that I can be looking at. If I'm in a new city, I will go online and I will scope things out ahead of time and find places to go. I went to Airhorn yesterday and bought an entire bag of different treats. I mean, they are putting Whole Foods to shame with the options that they have.
That's great.
Yeah. How about you? What do you do?
What do? I go in a restaurant and say what's gluten-free and figure out where I do the same thing, realize where I want to go.
Yep.
And but most days, especially out here in California, gluten-free is really accepted.
That's so easy.
5 years ago, coming from Chicago, it was accepted, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is out here. And so I realized eating out here is pretty easy, and it's easy if you say, hey, cook things with, exclude certain items when they're cooking.
Right.
And I find it a lot easier. So the name of the show is I Own It.
Yes.
Which you do. You own every aspect of your life. Was there a recent example in your life where you look at it and you say, I was wrong and I didn't own it fully? Share with me what was that time that you could look at?
A recent example of where I didn't own it and didn't embrace it fully. Okay, this is a silly one, and I put myself in trouble the other day. So I went to visit a college friend here in town, and we ended up meeting at her house because I wanted to see her husband, who was also friends with us in college, and their kids, instead of meeting at a restaurant.
Right.
But when you're gluten-free, you have a very difficult time. You don't want to say when they offer you food when nobody in that house is gluten-free.
Right.
Sure. What do you have? I can't eat gluten. I can't eat dairy. I'm mostly pescatarian. Please serve me something in your house. What I should have done was say, hey, let me order something for us for dinner.
Right.
But I was trying not to mess with anyone's schedule. And so I didn't do that, and I was incredibly hungry by the end of the night, and I went out to my car to grab a couple things to show them, and I saw, oh, I have some food in this bag from this event I went to, and I ended up grabbing a gummy and throwing it in my mouth.
Oh.
And because it was a nice, like, thick, delicious looking gummy.
Right.
And I forgot that it was a prototype for a celebrity brand's CBD gummies that I said I would try out.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that it was a Delta 9. And so I got very sick.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up staying at their house in their guest room that night just so we could spend more time and talk till 2 in the morning. And I took an Ambien later, and I realized that I shouldn't mix the two. And so I went to the emergency room with my friend that night because I had an anxiety attack. And it was such a weird, awful experience because I'm normally such a person that's very careful about everything I put in my body. But I was so hungry because I wouldn't say, hey, I have a gluten issue.
Right.
And so my friend was just the nicest person in the whole world. And it actually gave us more time to just talk by ourselves, which was kind of a special moment. So I don't know if I would fully take it back.
All right.
I feel like in every time that we end up not owning something or something goes wrong, it's just an opportunity for something that we didn't anticipate.
That's great.
And even though I was at the emergency room, I still got to have an extra hour just talking to my friend by ourselves with no one else around to kind of have a personal catch up.
So what's the best way for people to engage with you and follow you?
So you can engage or follow with me through, you can go to our website at dosmundoscreative.com, or follow us on Instagram. That's probably the best way to go about it.
Okay.
Reach out through our website, through our contact, or link up with me on LinkedIn is a great way to do it as well. Because I will check my LinkedIn at least a couple times a week and be pretty good about it. And then we'll move people to email if we're having a good conversation.
So we're going to wrap up with our 3 questions. You ready?
Yes.
All right. How old are you now, Kana?
I am 38.
Okay. So you're 38 years old, a lot of experience, entrepreneur, business owner. And we have a couch here. You can't see it. If I say lay on the couch, kick your feet up,
Okay.
close your eyes,
Okay.
go back to when you were 16 years old, 22 years ago.
Okay.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself back then at 16?
I think I would give myself advice that it's okay to continue to ask questions. I think at 16 years old, especially at the time, we were constantly told that whatever we're hearing is the absolute truth, and that any other way doesn't work, and to stop asking questions. I feel like women in particular were often told, like, that's not your area. And I think if I had continued to know it was okay to ask the questions I was thinking out loud, it would have been much easier to move ahead more quickly. There is an interesting thing where I feel like everybody talks about confidence. Right? When you're younger, be more confident, lean into who you are.
Exactly.
And I think there is that. But I think there's also a level of listen to the people around you and learn from them and be a peer in the space, right? Even at 16, it's not about being more confident, because if you're blindly confident at 16, you're not learning from the assets around you.
That's
but
right.
if you're asking questions to the people around you, you're actually getting value that helps you grow and be more confident and be seen more as a peer.
Well said. So it's our last day on earth, God forbid.
Okay.
It's just me and you.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
It's our last meal together.
Okay.
What are we eating? What are we drinking? It's your decision.
Ooh.
And obviously we roll the same way, so it should be a lot of fun.
So I would go back to, I went to this incredible restaurant in Lima, Peru that is known for its ceviche.
Ooh.
So we would be going to this restaurant, and I wish I could remember the name, but it's got waterfalls in the background. It's got a fake rock wall. It's very like elegant, like not Disney World style.
Right.
And they've got these just incredible ceviches from scallop to urchin to yellowtail that are just melt in your mouth good.
Oh, I like that.
And then probably be drinking. Ooh, that's a tough one. I feel like pisco goes really well.
Okay.
With that, but I had a really interesting cocktail made by my friend who owns a craft bar. That's also a community and third space arena. And she created this. What is it? And I'm not a whiskey person at all.
Right.
But a plum miso cocktail that was out of this world.
Really?
It was a little bit savory. And I would just go back for that again. I feel like you'd really enjoy it.
Okay. Gluten-free, huh?
Yeah, and it would go well with the ceviche, I think.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
So in our studio, you see we have a grand piano, drum set, and electric and acoustical guitars. Behind you is a black door, okay? And there it is.
Yes.
And you could have any band or musician walk through that door and play us a song. Kana, it could be living or deceased. Who would you have walk through that door, and what song would they play us?
Oh, geez. I feel like it would be really fun to have Freddie Mercury and Queen come in.
Wow.
Just because it would be an epic show. Can you imagine that big of a personality in this space?
Oh, that'd be great.
I mean, what would be the goods? What would be the best song? Under Pressure is great.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
But I feel like you can't go wrong with the classic "We Are the Champions" and "We Will Rock You."
Wow.
Right? I think we just need a medley. Can we do a medley?
Yeah, that's 2 episodes in a row. Someone said the exact same answer. That's
Really?
interesting. Yes.
That's so funny.
Yes, the last guest that was here said exactly the same thing. So I thought.
Well, I'm changing it then.
She said Queen. She didn't say Freddie Mercury. So it's a little different.
Then let me change to Elton John. Unfortunately,
Elton John would be good too.
But when he was in his
Earlier
early
days.
stages where he was flying off the piano.
All right. Well, Kana LiVolsi, thank you so much for joining us today. What a treat. Appreciate you coming in to Laguna Beach. If you're interested in listening to more episodes of the Ben Reinberg I Own It show, kick that right-hand button and click subscribe. Feel free to click that like button as many times as possible so we could stay out in the ether. Let it go viral. Kana LiVolsi is dropping some knowledge on us, so please feel free to continue to listen to the I Own It show. And to follow me personally, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all social media platforms and learning more about commercial real estate. Feel free to follow my company's website, alliancecgc.com. We are the leaders in commercial real estate investing throughout the United States. And feel free to log on to our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund. We are the leaders in investing passively in medical office properties. Kana LiVolsi, thank you so much for joining us again, and it was great seeing you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.